innovation is not something that just happens by accident, even though it looks that way to a lot of people. There is a very specific process that can help and lead to coming up with new ideas and seeing them through and executing on them instead of just saying, cool, that's a good idea, I'll do that in the future one day. And I really think that the leadership and the people behind that are what make that successful. So there's actually this interesting perspective in computer science that a company's organization ends up coming out in their code. So software applications mirror the company's organization in the workplace. So if you compare Google and Amazon and Apple, their software products and hardware products to the same degree all mirror those internal structures of their company.
Hello and welcome to another interview here at Open Source Workplace. For those who haven't been here before, my name is Stephen Todd. I'm the founder of Open Source Workplace. And if you haven't been here, as I said, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you're alerted to all upcoming videos. Open Source Workplace, we want to bring you information that allows you to maximize workplace productivity and employee experience. And with that, today I have Dan Moore who's with me, who is the co-founder of Vaporware. Dan, how are you doing?
Great, thanks for having me, Stephen.
No, thank you very much for making time to chat with us today. I'm super excited to chat with you. I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a while. Given your background and some of the conversations that I know happen in many real estate, HR, and CIT departments all around workplace and technology, I think some of the things that you've covered and things we're going to touch on in this interview are really applicable. So thank you for making yourself available.
Absolutely.
So Dan, I've given you a big introduction there saying how excited I am, but who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so I am currently a product manager is what I like to call myself. So what that means to me, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different organizations, is I like to solve problems. So for companies, I like to find their product market fit, and it's a very high kind of strategic level problem solving. So I like to take a different approach and use my technical background and come in and have this experience that maybe we'll talk about a little bit of seeing the world in like right or wrong answers, more of like the scientific approach to problem solving. But yeah, that's in a nutshell. I also happen to be the CEO of my small consultancy to do this and all the extra stuff that comes with that. We have a great team of about 5 people, including myself. So it brings a whole bunch of other experiences and challenges and skill sets that I need for all that. But at the end of the day, what I really get excited about is like finding really cool opportunities and business cases and returns on investments for companies. So that's where I like to focus.
It's really interesting that the first position you said you are is you're a product manager, then you're the CEO. That's kind of an interesting perspective. You know, most people would go the reverse of that. So that's interesting. I guess that shows you where your head is, right? Whenever you're involved in projects.
Absolutely. I think like I'm still billable on consulting relationships, and that's what really gets me excited. I think all the CEO stuff is how we work together as a team, and I was raised with a very collaborative mindset. And so I'm very team focused instead of I'm the one leader kind of directing everything. It's more of how do I encourage people around me to lead and help us get to where we need to go. So
great. So you're the CEO of Vaporware. What would you say Vaporware is? Because I just want to make sure people grasp what that company does, what your company does.
Yeah, absolutely. So one way to look at that is what do our competitors do? And a lot of them are called development firms or shops or studios or agencies. That's where we really started, was how do we build products and get them to market? And what we quickly realized is that our clients love the work that we do, and so they ask us to do anything and everything. But we really wanted to stay around one space, which was software products. So we don't do marketing and landing pages and campaign ads or SEO or anything like that. So we just focus on kind of 3 skill sets within product development, design development, and product management. And so it's basically, are we building the right product? Does it fit the business needs? Are we designing it for the right users? Are we actually talking and interfacing with them really well? And then are we building the product correctly? So does it work? Is it functional? The term vaporware, and it's not vape products or anything like that, like our government thinks. It is software that doesn't exist yet and is often promised or marketed without actually being real. And so we like to turn that on its head and say, no, we need real software to the market incredibly quickly. So we look at projects in like the 4 to 6 week range as opposed to months or years.
Got it. So you must have a high turnover, not turnover of clients, but a lot of projects pipeline that you're working through at a time then, given that time frame.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as a kind of partnership consulting firm, we like to work on really small, specific goal sets at a time. And so that's where we break things down into these 4 to 6 week chunks. And If we're successful at that, that's where we know if we need to pivot and choose something different, or go after a different business model, let's say, or if we can continue down that same path and come up with the next chunk and the next thing to work on. So it's sometimes we switch to completely new products with a pivot, with working with startups or entrepreneurs inside of enterprises that have ideas and want to innovate a lot. They might want to pivot around a lot. So.
Got it. So you sort of going back a little bit in time, you went to school computer science. What got you interested in that? And
great question. So I started programming. I don't know if I would call it programming, but I started hacking on computers when I was 8 years old. So I didn't always know that I wanted to be a computer scientist or a programmer, but I didn't really have a choice. It just kind of felt right and natural. My mom was the one that got me into the industry. So she was in IT programming on punch cards back in the day, and did some work with NASA and a bunch of other businesses. And it just really surrounded me with technology and different ways of thinking. And so I've just always been around computers, and they've always been natural. I was tearing them apart, seeing how they worked, sometimes putting them back together, sometimes not. So it's just really something I've always been involved in at that point.
Yeah. And then, so obviously you progress, you go to college, you then start working. Did you always want to own your own organization, be part of your own business, or was that not in your thinking?
That was not. So neither of my parents, and I think I had a grandparent that did some of their own entrepreneurship type stuff at one point, but I didn't really learn that from anybody. How I fell into that almost was I read the book, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and it just made so much sense to me that why aren't more people doing business this way? Like it seemed like that computer scientist mindset of there was a right answer to business. But at the time I knew nothing about business. I'd never started my own company or anything. And what I realized though was that personally, my motivation is driven by the people around me and the people I work with. So I needed a team and a group of people because I couldn't just sit there and do something myself. It wasn't worthwhile to me. It wasn't something I could wake up and do every day. So that's where the company kind of came in. I didn't see the exact company around me that I wanted to join, and I had plenty of responsibilities and fiduciary duties to my wife and family. So I didn't want to just go out and join and take risks and find the exact team and move across the country or something like that. Instead, I was like, well, let's see what we can come up with here. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting how people actually, one, fall into workplace, but also two, fall sometimes into entrepreneurial, right? Because in essence, they don't see the solution around them or the way they think or how they operate or what best fits them individually. So right. I think it's always interesting to hear those stories. So obviously looking at what you're doing, and obviously the industries that you help focus on are startups, are entrepreneurs, and specifically around HR, real estate, IT, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So how do companies best assess, or entrepreneurs best assess that approach to actually identifying, do I build, do I go outside? How do I evaluate those sort of questions?
That's a great question. So it's one we get a lot. I actually just gave a talk about 4 different strategies. So buying and building are the 2 most prevalent and common options. There's also partnering and acquiring, which are slightly different strategies as well. So I would say it first starts with like 2 main factors. One are what kind of skill sets does your organization have? So what are your capabilities? You need a lot more to build software than you need to buy software. But you still need really good capabilities to buy the right software and make sure that it's integrated with your organization in the right way. The second main factor, the thing to look at, is what is your risk tolerance? So building software often takes more time, not just like time to build, but time to realize the value of that software than buying. And so it can often lead to riskier situations just in the nature of the farther away from that decision point you get, the more you might miss on that original intent. So between those 2 and how that fits within your organization, that's kind of how we map if a client is a good fit for us and our services that we offer, if they'd make a good fit for building their own software and becoming a software company, more so than just using someone else's piece of software.
Got it. And what do you think is the most, I was going to say the most successful, but that's probably not the way to do it. What is the most effective way to do it? And you can sort of balance that out with cost, time, and return on investment, What do you think?
To build software?
Well, whether to implement and roll out, right? So if you're an organization, what do you think? What are the obviously you mentioned the trade-offs, but in your experience, what do you think pays the most dividend for an organization?
So it's a great question. There are a lot of different kinds of organizations. I think we're looking at another 2 main factors. One is, what is the scale of the problem? So taking on an economy of scale approach of return on investment to basically say, is this only going to solve the problem for me, or can I turn around and sell this piece of software to other people? Or if it's going to solve the problem for me, is that value that it's going to solve and that uniqueness perspective to it really going to make the moves that it needs to give me that competitive advantage? So along with that comes the control aspect of custom software is like, can we make this exactly what we want, as opposed to getting a tool off the shelf? So for example, like a CRM system like Salesforce, completely commoditized at this point. There's a couple thousand of them probably out there, but you can have a very general standardized industry approach like Salesforce and buy that software off the shelf, or you could take and create one that's unique to your organization and how your team works. And a lot of people try to do that, but don't realize that like you can actually get away with a lot of the same stuff in Salesforce. So maybe you should just go with that option. But if you have like a really specific relationship that needs a specific way of working, Salesforce might not be for you.
Right, right. And what I've sort of found in my own experience, and when I speak to my peers as well, is software, especially in the workplace industry, is quite immature in the sense that technology is common to fix problems that, we've often used Excel sheets and sort of, manual lists and so on and so forth to actually track and sort of monitor things. Software, promises huge things and opportunities. However, the ability to implement, the time to implement, also the providers are very rigid to their own word, but they're trying to accommodate a mass market, right?
Right.
So what are some of the things that, as you evaluate these things, you need to consider before making a decision?
Yeah. As a software company or as an evaluator?
It's sort of as a workplace practitioner, or we can do it as a software. We can do it both ways. What sort of things need to be considered?
Yeah. So we kind of talked about like, do we want to control the software, or do we want to take on the risk of how much time we have? I think how the piece of software ends up integrating with our company. So you mentioned like one software trying to solve to everyone's issue. Really sitting down and understanding your internal process, I think, is a really good start. So even though you have all these spreadsheets working around and maybe you don't have the process like documented out, but you still have a process that's followed in your organization. And so like walking through that process and seeing how it maps to the software to see if the software is a good fit is a really good way to evaluate. There's when more on the build choice, you can also look at what's that differentiator and what's that unique piece that you need. So often when we think of software, we think of tons of features and functionality that need to fit into that process. But when you're building software these days, there are so many components out there that you can get away with that aren't part of your differentiation or your core value proposition. That is what we call it on the software side. So for example, we can integrate with like Google Calendar or iCalendar or Outlook instead of building our own calendaring solution, but build that in together through an integration instead of building everything from scratch. So like there's Stripe for payments, there's maps out there for GPS guidance. Like there are components and pieces that it's more of like a hybrid approach between build and buy, as opposed to just black and white, one or the other. So
yeah, no, it's funny you're saying, as you're talking, I'm thinking of the sort of the business models. If you take someone like Airbnb, right, how much of their technology actually is proprietary, right? Very, very little, small piece of code, but actually it's the process and the system and the actual business model that they created that makes it very unique, So it's funny you say that. It's all that sort of spinning in my head. What do you think are the key factors or things that organizations should be thinking about that maybe they don't see as they sort of make their decision? So to give you an example, one of the things that I've struggled with that I know is underestimating our own internal systems, our own internal repository of information, it not being consistent, not being sort of different departments have the information in different formats and different ways. Beyond that sort of thing, what other things do you think organizations should be thinking about whenever they're making a decision?
I would also definitely think about your people and your organization structure. So one thing we talk to existing companies about all the time is your organization set up to really innovate and create these things? So innovation is not something that just happens by accident, even though it looks that way to a lot of people. There is a very specific process that can help and lead to coming up with new ideas and seeing them through and executing on them instead of just saying, cool, that's a good idea, I'll do that in the future one day. And I really think that the leadership and the people behind that are what make that successful. So there's actually this interesting perspective in computer science that a company's organization ends up coming out in their code. So software applications mirror the company's organization in the workplace. So if you compare Google and Amazon and Apple, their software products and hardware products to the same degree all mirror those internal structures of their company.
That's interesting. I hadn't even thought of it that way, but yeah, you're so right. Whenever you identify those three companies, everyone probably sits and nods, go, yeah, you're so right, you're so right. Interesting. So obviously, to implement this, one of the key things that I find important is to have the skill sets within the team. So if people are watching this, they're HR, they're technology, they're real estate. The question I have is, should we be thinking about recruiting computer scientists to our teams?
Yes. So I might be biased as a computer scientist, but I am fully of the belief, and it's part of our company's vision and mission, that every company in the future will be a software company. So I think that software, to quote some investors, is eating the world. But on a more realistic level, computer science and software development is a way of thinking. It's a logical process that has a right or wrong answer sometimes. There's debate if it's an art or a science, like computer science versus computer engineering. But in general, absolutely. So having a computer scientist on staff, or someone trained in programming, or just someone that thinks in terms of process and spreadsheets and data entry and exchange is vital to your organization. So we already see all these organizations with IT departments, but I think we'll start to see the majority of organizations in the future being more around what is our custom software, what is our process behind that, what is our data points, and the value of that information. Instead of just a tier, I think it'll become a core piece, just like we have HR and other pieces to our organizations.
So to that end, then, is there any kid who's going to college these days who shouldn't be doing computer science?
No, I think it's a good. There may be some like specialties within inside of computer science that are questionable.
Right.
So I went to Georgia Tech, and I was part of their first class that had this program, and basically there were 8 choices as an undergrad. You had 8 different threads or specialties, and you got to choose 2 of them. And that was everything from algorithms and theoretical computer science to psychology and human computer interaction and user interface type stuff. So there's a lot to that field. There's a lot of really deep math behind algorithms and theory that I am not good at all. Like computer science originally came out of mathematics. So I think that there's a lot of room for a lot of different improvement because it's such a broad industry at this point.
Right. Yeah, it is. And sort of one of the things that I'm evaluating as I sort of trying to bring in interns or bring on a computer scientist is their fascination with specific software.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting because almost software is their first choice. If you think about filters, the filter is the first choice as the software. What advice or guidance would you give to people with that approach or mindset?
So I went through that right out of college. I joined Cisco, the networking company, and they had a program at the time called Cisco Choice, where I got hired to Cisco and then got to interview around. I think it was one of their answers to millennials, but I spent the first month at Cisco getting a paycheck, interviewing internally on different teams and getting to choose which team I worked with. And I chose based on software and what technology were they working on. I regret some of those decisions, I would say, because and maybe this was just a personal growth standpoint, but technologies come and go. I think that there are overall trends behind technology, but it's really ended up being the people that I worked with and the mindsets and having that group camaraderie that makes a work life enjoyable. So really understanding like what do you enjoy, and yes, as a pure developer, you may really enjoy working on this one technology, but to not hold on to that because they come and go. So.
So, and then beyond that, sort of take that a little bit step further, I'd be curious to hear your opinion on, as computer scientists come out of college and they're all aspiring to work at, the Googles, the Apples, the Amazons, and so on and so forth, right? Or they may have an opportunity to work at a small team in a small company to be able to master their craft. What guidance would you give to someone who's sitting with or thinking through those different options?
Yeah. Early on in my career, and still kind of to this day, I prioritize learning environments. And so I think that that's very big. In computer science in particular, it's moving so rapidly, we have to constantly be learning something new. And so that's one of my filters, and why some of these companies stand out is that if you can go and learn from other experts in your field, and just there's no learning like actually doing and being in those environments and experiencing it, that goes a very long way, and that's very valuable. So we talk to a lot of students out of boot camps, for example. I'm part of a couple of mentorship programs, and one piece that I give them is say, like, hey, if you can afford it, take a lower salary as long as that organization is set up to give you that learning environment. And there are kinds of questions and things that you can ask to really see if that's going to be the type of environment for you. Like, how many other interns are they hiring, or have they done this a lot? Versus, is this an organization that just kind of wants cheap labor and is not going to give you the support that you need as an intern, as someone new to the industry? So I think that, there's a bunch of really good organizations out there that have thought through it and understand it. At the same time, if you already have some experience and you're looking to make a big impact, that's where a small team is really helpful as well. So if you're the first person into an organization with a background, you want to make sure that the person hiring you or that you're working with understands that you're bringing a totally different perspective to the table. So if you're that first computer science intern in an organization that has never hired those before, that's a really awesome opportunity to make a bunch of impact and change. So it totally depends on the individual and how confident they are at bringing that to the table versus, hey, I'm mainly here to learn and to listen, versus I really want to make an impact right now. So
got it. No, that's great guidance. Great guidance. So obviously, CEO, you're responsible for the workplace and the work environment that your team operates from. How do you go about ensuring that you create that environment that allows your team to maximize workplace productivity and their employee experience?
Great question. I've spent probably too much time doing that, since that's not billable or anything, but I think how we work, and that's very important to me personally. And I think it comes down to two things. One is being authentic. So as a leader, if you want to do something new and lead your organization something new, you can't just tell them, hey, tomorrow we're going to go and become a nonprofit and it's going to be a totally different company. You have to lead through influence, and especially in a small organization like ours, every single person defines our company culture. So I think I read a report at one point that it was like, maybe it's from Harvard Business, that anything over 20% is de facto part of your company culture. So if you have 10 people, 2 of them can drastically change your company culture. So you want the company to reflect those people, and vice versa. And I think this is part of what millennials in general might have been getting at, was they can just, maybe as us as human nature, can smell authenticity a mile away. So and I think the second thing is what those motivators behind those individuals are. So every single person in our organization is motivated differently, comes into work for a different reason. It's all behind the same mission, but they all have sub pieces or incentives, you could call it, behind that. So you want to make sure that those incentives are aligned around that same authentic culture that you have. So we've partnered and seen a lot of organizations that have misalignments, and that's where a lot of their team frustration and troubles come in, is just having different motivators and not recognizing those motivators. So watching for that behavior and helping people make sure that they can come in and love work is an incredible part of that.
Yeah, so I mean, just follow up. So when you were recruiting, did you intentionally try to recruit different mindsets, different personalities, or did that just come out of finding the best people to do the specific tasks that you were recruiting for?
So I recruit for leaders at our small organization. We can't have someone just taking orders. So we like to think of ourselves as an expert team, and that's who we are as an organization. So as long as people can come in and lead and not be told individual tasks, was our driving factor, is those people that are able to find self-motivation and communicate their motivations and stuff like that. It just so happened that they were all slightly different and they saw different things in the company culture. And so another piece that we look for is diversity, because diversity requires, or innovation, we believe, requires diversity. And so that's not diversity in the sense of just race or skin color. It's diversity in the sense of socioeconomic backgrounds and understanding perspectives in different ways. So religion, politics, all sorts of those really hard conversations in a workplace. It's important to have very different mindsets coming together to see the world in different ways and help clients the way that we do.
No, I totally love that. And one of the other things that I often get asked is, do I need to have a workplace or real estate experience to come and work on the team? And one of my things to that is no, because actually bringing different perspectives, the real estate stuff we can teach, right? All that's teachable, but that different mindset, you can't teach that. The different approach, you can't teach that. So it's something that, I totally agree with you 100%. I love the diverse mindsets and bringing that together. So obviously, you're the leader. You've got to come in with energy. You've got to come in and sort of promote that sort of workplace productivity. What do you do to actually ensure that you're on your game each day when your staff see you?
I'm not, first and foremost, I'm not all the time. It is something that I think looking for leaders, I'm also looking for the people around me. So I'm not looking to be the exact person that everyone comes to. But um, yeah, my personal motivation is that team. So I know that people depend on me, and vice versa. We have very strict guidelines around 40-hour work weeks and making sure that we're not burning out people. Um, Working from home is something that we do once a week. And it's a good time to kind of unplug from the team and like heads down, get a specific task done. But I find that like my productivity is really driven by other people holding me accountable. And so I really like the office space, and I'm really motivated by that team. So I would say that that makes me the most productive, not someone else watching me, but it's more of that self-policing that someone else is dependent on the work that I have to do and needs to get done by a specific date or time. So
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people can attest to that, to having those that in place. I totally agree with you. So then, does your whole team work at home the same day, or do you do? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So we currently have it set up on Wednesdays, work from home Wednesdays.
That's perfect.
And we really try and be cognizant that like there is no you're at work, you can turn off home and vice versa. So a lot of people, we tried core hours for a while of, flex the morning and the afternoon. Working with ClientWorks, meetings are incredibly important, and there's not a whole lot of independent tasks where one of us can just go off heads down work and not talk to anybody else. Just in the nature of the software development world and the work that we do, it's very collaborative, trying to find the right answer and discover together. So we found that lining up people's schedules like that is more important than a lot of people take. So especially at a small company like ours, if we each had 3 different days of work from home, then we'd only have 2 days in the office that we'd all be together. So
yeah, no, and I think Gallup had studies, they presented studies were showing that teams who actually work from home together and are in the office together are probably the most optimized, optimal.
awesome.
I think their number was like it was either 2 or 1.9 or something like that. The number of days actually they found optimal, because to your point, people having that ability to do heads down work at home, but then everyone's together in the office. That's where everything gets optimized, because there's just energy when you're around your team when you haven't seen them in a few days.
Yeah.
I work from home 2 days a week, and I know when I'm in the office, I'm just happy to see everybody. That different interaction you get when you got eye-to-eye contact, So
yeah, and there's something about actually putting on clothes in the morning instead of working.
Well, I typically put on clothes every morning, but that's up to you, Dan. We all make choices each day. But you mentioned about relaxation and getting away. What sort of things do you do to help you switch off your mind?
Yeah, switching off my mind is something I need to do more. No, so I really like to road cycle. I like to, I've countered that recently with a little bit of yoga, but I like to play a lot of games, just casual. It's okay if I lose kind of games. It gives my brain something to think about that's not as impactful, it feels like, as work. So, but yeah, I would say that cycling is the main like physical activity that I get. It is a very physical sport.
Yeah, no, it is. As a cyclist as well, I love it. Unfortunately, we're in the winter months, and I'm only a fair weather cyclist, so I'm kind of missing it at the moment. Raleigh, North Carolina is probably a little bit different. You probably have more
spring. Yeah, like we've had spring weather already. It's already been like 70 degrees here. It's crazy.
I'm jealous, man. I'm jealous.
I also do a lot of spin cycling when I can't get out as much. So I first got into cycling 7 years ago now, and was doing some fundraising for the LLS, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, for blood cancers. And yeah, I just found a really good training community. Was doing like long distance century type riding. But now a spin class where everyone's like energetic and in the same room together is pretty intense. But
it is. I love them too, just because everyone's pushing in the same. You have no idea what anyone else is doing, but everyone looks like they're pushing exactly the same amount. It's awesome, and the music as well. But yeah, no, I love the cycling too. So before we wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we may not have touched on? I just want to give you that opportunity before we wrap up.
Yeah, sure. So we talked a lot about buying and versus building and different considerations that you need between those 2 different models. I think that there is this hybrid model between the 2 that a lot of people don't consider, is that what tools are out there that you don't need to necessarily recreate from scratch, and how do you integrate them together. I think the other 2 as well, of acquiring companies or acquiring software products and partnering with companies to achieve the outcomes that you're trying to get, are more viable and should be considered in similar ways as purchasing software that you could swipe with your credit card. So I think that in general, like what we do is we're looking for opportunities where we can partner with innovative people and that have challenging problems that they might not know how to solve. And so we have a couple of assessments that we do, and to really see if there's an opportunity and if it makes sense to build custom software, or if there's something already out there in the market that would make more sense for their individual needs. So I'd be more than happy to chat with people if they wanted to reach out.
No, we'll definitely get people to reach out, but I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
in my experience, what I found, the best approach is the hybrid model. And obviously to do that, you have the skill sets internally, and you have to have the support internally from, be it, a software development team or your own software developers on your team itself. Also the initial software you select, because a lot of them, I say a lot of them, some don't want to push information, they want to pull information, so they won't push that out. So I think that's something people have to be cognizant of as well. So I do like the hybrid model. Obviously, I would ideally love to go and buy, but I think a lot of people in this workplace industry, I'm not sure there is a sole provider who can actually provide an organization, an enterprise level software package that includes HR, real estate, workplace, technology, and so on and so forth. And I think also the acronyms, the words, the sort of how we describe things within each company is so different that one word means something to one company, another company means something to something else, or the KPIs that company follow or track are so different that that's why I think sometimes perhaps the hybrid model is the best solution for organizations. But that's just my perspective and my experience. It's not necessarily to say that that's the right solution for anybody or everybody.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense and touches on a lot of key points of what differentiates some organizations from others and why one off-the-shelf piece of software doesn't work for everybody. So I think that's a very common experience and outlook on software. So I think you hit the nail on the head with the problem of the industry, or both of those industries kind of colliding together today. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I would also say that, like, if you are thinking about scaling up these teams to bring on computer scientists and hire people, there are ways to like short circuit some of that and make it a little bit faster so that you can realize that value and show leadership that you're headed in the right direction. But then you need to bring on a team, which might take a couple of years to get the right team together. So those are two different problems that need to happen at the same time, and probably why they're not as successful 100% of the time that we hope them to be. So
what is the solution that you're sort of teasing me with there?
You gotta wait to find out.
There you go.
I would say that it's kind of a combination of finding experts that are willing to come in and like set up the organization in the first way. So there's a whole group of consultants out there on agile transformations and high level stuff like that. But where we come in and help, because we are the solution that I'm hinting at. No, one approach that we take to solving that is we could come in and quickly iterate on a new idea and finding that right product, while at the same time we can help you hire and interview and look for the right skills. So you mentioned computer scientists that want to work on a particular technology. Like, we could set up those right technologies to attract those people, to make sure that you're not building something in a technology that you won't find anybody to come and be excited about and join. So
yeah, no, that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, it is. All right, Dan, look, I appreciate you giving us so much time today. Very interesting conversation. As I said, I was very excited to chat with you. So I really appreciate you taking the time. And as Dan mentioned, we're going to create a profile for Dan Open Source Workplace. Click on the link below, reach out to him, message him, and say hi. We'll have his LinkedIn contact information as well, so you'll be able to reach out directly to Dan. So Dan, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephen, for having me.
No, my pleasure, man.